All right, here we go. Mike Daly is a musician by trade. Um, when was the first time that you picked up a drumstick?
Age 3
Age 3.
that I remember. That's when they officially. My father was a drummer.
Oh, was he? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and he hadn't played in probably, I don't know, long before I was around.
Mm.
And that stuff was laying around the house, and somehow it found its way into my hands. And it just kind of happened.
Mm. Did you have any training at all, or just
not till way later?
Mm.
I started playing right away, like in kindergarten, at Stern School. That's where I went to school.
Yeah, we had that conversation. My kids go to Stearns, and still one of the best kept secrets
It is.
in the
It was
city
a
of
great
Pittsfield.
school.
It really is a wonderful, wonderful school. And so, did you have any music teachers there?
I did. I think Mr. Grundon. I remember that name. And I faked my way into it because I begged to be in the school band, which had to be in second grade.
Mm.
So he let me come down, and they had this thing. They put like the sheet music out, and it had paradiddles, double paradiddles, single stroke rolls, double stroke rolls. And
I just like paradiddles. I just could, let's say that and hear that word all night, and then I'll be happy.
yes, paradiddle. So you had to read the sheet music, and he said, well, if you can do this, I'll let you in, with the other kids. So I listened to them, and I just mimicked what they were doing and pretended I was reading it, and I snuck in.
Good.
Yeah. And then
fake it till you make it.
Yeah. So that's what happened. And then it just kept going and never stopped.
Mm. Was it continuing through school? Did you do the drumming or?
Yeah. I would get kicked out of bands and stuff. I was one of those kids, like school bands.
Oh, school bands.
Yes.
So like you weren't out there marching in the 4th of July parade or nope. Something like that. You never
got to that level because as soon as I heard Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, everything changed. I was fascinated with what I was hearing, and music became an escape, a place to go, a safe place, where that was my whole world. Where a lot of kids get into sports or whatever they do. For me, it was I couldn't wait to get home and start playing drums. Let's see, I was doing the whole school thing. What happened? I found my mother's old record collection, which was the Beatles, Sabbath, Zeppelin, the Stones, all that stuff. And to me, that was my whole world. I fell in love with that stuff. And then I remember one year I was probably about 6 or 7, and my parents took me and my sisters to the Big E, and the Mandrell sisters.
Sisters.
Yeah, they were playing.
Yeah, they were a big deal in the 80s, right?
Yes. And for some reason, Louise Mandrell got off the stage and came down and grabbed me and brought me up on the stage. I don't remember how that happened or why, but I just remember I was on the stage with them, and she really liked me. She thought I was a cute kid or something. And
now, how old were you?
I'm going to say 6 or 7.
Mm.
So they had me just hang out on the stage for most of the concert. It was really cool. And I still have the black and white promo thing, their photo that they signed for me and everything. And Earlene was the sister who played the drums, and she gave me some drumsticks and some stuff like that. And wow. So I went home, and that was a big, it was a highlight of my life. And when you're a little kid and the first celebrity you meet, you're all about them, So I instantly, I was like, I'm a Mandrell Sisters fan.
That's so funny. Wow. I never would have thought that. The Mandrell, because I remember it was because didn't Barbara Mandrell, she did a lot of solo stuff.
Yep.
Maybe later on.
Because she was an incredible lap steel player. And she was a child. Steel. Yeah, she was a child prodigy for that too.
Okay.
Lap steel, that country sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when she was
was it on the lap, or is it that the one that sort of stands up and
that's a pedal steel.
That's a pedal steel. Yeah. Okay.
So she played that too. Lap steel, you actually play on your lap.
Okay. I'm showing my complete ignorance.
Well, it's not a very common.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd never heard of that before, but wow. 6 years old, that must have been just life altering.
Yeah, it made me, I said it, that was the year I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. So, and ironically, the next year, back at the Big E, Crystal Gale was playing, and somehow I ended up back on the stage. I don't know.
All these names are coming back to me from like those were the people that I remember growing up because my mother was a big fan, Barbara Mandrell and Crystal Gale, and they were the big deal back then. Holy cow!
Yeah,
That was like the who's who of sort of pop singing. I mean, maybe it was but it wasn't like alt country back then because that didn't even exist.
that was like the era of hee haw and all that stuff.
Yeah,
so it was when country went mainstream. And not that I was a country fan, I ended up becoming one way later in life. But those were my first experiences on a stage, and I was just hearing people yell and cheer, and it was just like, wow, this is cool. It was a feeling that once you experience it, you're like, I got to keep doing this. So I started, I'm going to put my own band together. That was my big thing. Other kids in the neighborhood and that kind of thing.
Where'd you grow up?
Right on Bryant Street behind Stern School.
Okay.
And I was I did the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts. I was in the Boy Scouts with Chief Wynn.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Like as a when you think you're like, oh, Chief Wynn, he must have been like no, he was actually in the Boy Scouts. He was a Boy Scout with you.
I think he was I don't know if that was Cub Scouts or Boy Scout. He was a year older than me. So he was one of his close friends was my next door neighbor. So, kids in the neighborhood. But I remember him and his brother from Stern School on up.
No kidding. I didn't know he went to Stern School. So I assume he probably didn't play in the band with you though.
Nope. No. And then, life ended up taking weird twists and turns. And by age 11, I ended up in foster system. And so that changed things.
What happened?
My parents' marriage didn't work out. And when you're a kid, you don't know, but it didn't work out. And my parents divorced. I ended up first with my mother, and then from there foster care, and then my father, and then foster care, and then pretty much stayed in foster care till I was about around 15, and then I was on my own. That was that. I touched back home a couple times. When I was 15, I took off for Florida with another friend of mine locally here. And I lied to him. I told him we had a place to stay. We had, I've got everything set up. And he's like, really? So we
just have to get ourselves there. Everything's all set.
Yeah, that's what happened. So we scrounged up. He worked at Arts Mobile on Elm Street. And he was the first person I met in the area that he was from Brooklyn, and he had long hair and a leather jacket and all these patches all over it with bands I never heard of. And I was fascinated. I was like, what's Slayer and what is all this stuff? Venom. And I was really intrigued by it. So he turned me on to all this music that I had never heard before. And it was, like really heavy metal, like really heavy stuff. And just where I was in life, I gravitated towards it because that type of music, there's like a brotherhood that goes with it. It's like a lifestyle. And when you're young and you're trying to find your way, so I talked him into taking off to Florida. He worked at Arts Mobile. He was like 2 years older than me. So we literally got on a Greyhound. I had $27. I think he might've had $100, a couple cartons of smokes. And we went as far as we could go. And it took us to St. Petersburg, Florida. Never been there before in my life. Neither had he. And then he said, so where are we going when we got there? And then he realized I didn't have a plan. I didn't know anybody. There was no place to stay.
What was he pissed off or what?
Oh, yeah, you could say that. You could say that.
Oh, man.
But we were going to, the plan was we were going to be rock stars. We were gonna put a band together because the very first heavy metal band in Pittsfield was a band called Odium that I put together when I was in high school. And it went on for like years after I was gone, but it was like, I had this dream of, I wanted to be a rock star like everybody, and I wanted to get out of small town and
I
make my
mean,
way.
talk about with the metaphor of burning the ships in the harbor. I mean, you literally used all the money you had in the world to get down there with no plan whatsoever. I mean, I mean, people would think, oh my God, that's crazy, that's irresponsible, but it sure is a commitment. You knew exactly what you wanted to do, and
But I
maybe
didn't know what I was doing.
you
I
didn't,
didn't.
but you didn't. You know what I'm saying? Like at least you knew one thing, and
I
like
mean, there was a period before that though. Like here, I was homeless. So my last year in high school here at PHS, I was after in and out of a few different foster homes, and there was a few really good families here that really looked out for me. But my last year in high school here, I was sleeping in the elevator in the winter at the Hilton, which was the Hilton Inn, the Crown Plaza, or whatever it is now, the Holiday Inn.
mm,
And winters here were brutal. So when my friend Steve took this job at Arts Mobile, it had a heated bathroom. So I'd go he worked third shift, and I'd go hang out with him all night and sleep in the bathroom when I needed
huh.
sleep.
So how did I mean that's in the sort of foster system? You were with families,
Yep.
you were, and like was that a limited commitment per time, and then you had to move on to another family, or
I would
or
rebel against it.
yeah.
I mean, families were terrific to me, but I was a confused young teenager trying to figure out what the hell was happening, and you just anytime anybody would get close to me, I'd push them away. I'd freak out, and so there were a few families that actually wanted to adopt me, but I didn't really want any part of that. I don't know why. I just would freak out and just wanted to be left alone. So when we decided to get out of here, of course, I get down to Florida with him, and he wanted to get back home as soon as possible. So all our friends up here raised money to try to get us back home, because we had nothing to eat. We were on the streets. It was crazy. It really was.
But he probably, to some extent, your threshold for doing what you were doing was much higher than him, because you in Pittsfield, you had done that. You were homeless
Right.
in Pittsfield, and so I assume that was easier for you to deal with in Florida than for him.
Yeah, I was excited because I was looking at palm trees and things I'd never seen before, and it was I came from Pittsfield, and I was seeing things that, like, what's this? What's that? What's a strip club? What are all these things? I didn't know what was what. It was like a whole new world. And we came back. I lasted a couple months, and crazy enough, I scrounged up some cash, and back on a bus I went, and I headed back on my own. And then stayed there. I think a few years homeless in Florida, 3 or 4 years. And but music was still a consistent thing for me.
What were you doing for the music? What were you? I mean, were you playing gigs? Were you,
No, not yet. But I would take jobs at like labor pools and stuff like that, where you work by the day and you get paid by the day. Because most places I wasn't old enough to work, and I didn't really have any skills.
Wait, just remind you, you were 15 at the time, or
when I went back, I think by that point I was probably 16.
16.
But I had no skills. I didn't have a driver's license, so it was limited what I could do. I worked in a car wash, those kind of jobs, basic entry level labor jobs, and I was able to scrounge up enough money to buy some drums. And I was living in a storage unit.
Where do you put the drums?
Right in the storage unit.
Man, that's passion right there.
Yeah, I mean, I was. You're young. You can handle anything physically. I couldn't do that now, but back then I could go 3-4 days without eating. I used to. There was a McDonald's near the storage bin where I had, and I would wait till the crew came out, and they would toss the food in, and if you grabbed it immediately while it was still in the wrappers, you'd be able to eat before it got in the dumpster. And that's how I would eat. I ate McDonald's out of a dumpster for a good year.
Hmm.
And I did make some money, but anytime I had enough money, I'd save up and I'd get a cymbal stand, and then I'd get a new cymbal, and then I just started building a drum kit, and I kept practicing and practicing, and I had a natural ability with it anyway. I had been playing for a long time, so eventually I got a break, and there was a death metal band called Asheron, and they had just signed a record deal, and they took me as their drummer, and that was the beginning of me being able to get off the street and afford my first apartment.
When I think about that, and going through what you went through when you had people who were kind of willing to sort of take you in, and you said no. It's interesting because what makes up a decision. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I'm thinking to myself, at any point did you look back and say, geez, maybe I'm going to call Mr. Smith back and maybe, that sort of thing. Like, and I'm sure that would go through the mind of some people in that circumstance. You just kept driving and doing that. You ever think about that? I mean, like what was driving you at that point, and how did you make it through that?
I just stayed focused, and it wasn't like a healthy time for me. I mean, a lot of drinking, you do whatever you can to exist. So, I mean, night times were scary times, when you're on the streets, nighttime it's a terrifying time. And backing up a little bit. So when I was working and trying to get these drum kits and everything, so I hit 18, and in Florida at that time, and it could be this way now, the strip clubs there, the full nude strip clubs were 18 and up, and they called them juice bars because there was no alcohol served. So there was one near where I was staying, and I would go there because it was open till 5 a.m. and that allowed me to get off the street, and I felt safe in there. So I'd go in and I'd buy a Coke, and I'd try to nurse that thing till they'd throw me out for not spending any money. But when I was 18, I probably looked like I was 13. And some of the girls there just liked me. They felt sorry for me. So one night, this girl came up to me, and she said, "Hey, can you do me a favor? Will you run across the street to Crystal's," Crystal's is White Castle. They're the same thing. I think the same company. So will you run across the street to Crystal's if I give you a few bucks and grab me something to eat? And you can keep the change or grab yourself something to eat. So I did, and she gave me a 20. And I came back, and it was like $11 left. I was like, oh my God, I got $11. So I wasn't going to waste that on food. I was like, I got $11. So I was all excited about that. And the next night, when I went back, I'd go there every night so I could get off the street. And the next night, her and another girl came up to me, and they had a little list. Can you get this one, this one, this one, this? Well, after about a month or so, I was the gopher for the doorman, all the girls, and I started making $200, $300, $400 a night. They would tip me out, and that changed everything. That started giving me some real money.
You found an niche.
Yeah, to be able to feed myself, get smokes, do the things I needed to do, and play music. And I had enough back then. I thought the storage bin was expensive, but it was $59 a month, and it allowed me to pay that also. So, and that, I just kept playing drums. I just kept playing and playing and playing. And then I fell into that gig with that band Asheron, which introduced me to all the other signed bands. And it turned out I was pretty good at what I did. So everybody wanted to start picking me up.
And how did you get good? Because, you think, okay, well, you're able to get the drum set into the storage bin. You got to be practicing. I presume at some point during the day through all this. Like, what was that process for you that made you get as good as you got?
I had a pretty decent boom box in there, and those storage bins, I mean, it's a concrete floor and it's metal, so the sound goes everywhere. And I'd sit in there and I'd put tapes in of all the music I wanted to learn. And I played 15 hours a day, every single day,
15 hours a day.
every day,
Wow.
nonstop. And I did that literally for 10 years. There was a 10-year block where I played 15 hours a day, at least. Sometimes I would do a gig and then immediately I wouldn't hang out with the band. I'd go home and keep playing. I just keep playing.
When people say they want to do something and they're committing to something, you know, go do it 15 hours a day for 10 years and then come back. You know, holy that really is unbelievable. That's amazing.
I wanted it. And
Clearly, yeah.
And I was in awe of the people I was meeting, because a lot of them were people, I had their posters on my wall, a few years before that. So it was like, I wanted to impress. I wanted to be part of what they were part of. And, drums is a different instrument because it's so physical. It's, I guess guitar, you could say, is physical too, but there's a lot of memorizing scales and there's certain textbook things you learn. Drums, you got to commit, and it's muscle memory. And like any athletic activity, you just got to keep doing it over and over and over and over. And eventually something happens. You hit a point where you're just doing stuff. I would forget I would forget things that people never even learned yet, because it just through muscle memory just would happen.
I think there's probably a lot of people who probably don't appreciate the quality of a drummer. It probably takes a really good drummer to understand the difference between, I don't know, just name a couple of drummers, right? But the difference between someone who can fake it and do a good job, and then the guy that is amazing. So like, what is that difference? I mean, other than a hell of a lot of practice, but you can hear it, I'm sure, even in recordings or what have you. But what are some of those nuances that make someone really, really good? And aside from the amazing solo that people hear and they're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. But like the role of a great drummer is to bring it all together, right? Is to keep it all together.
Your job is, you are the heartbeat of the band. And it's funny because the way the music industry works, drummers, they hardly ever get theirs. It's starting to change because the industry is realizing that, but drummers always were pushed out of the way when it came to publishing rights. And if you're going to make any money in music, you have to have publishing rights. So
unless you're saying too, right? Like who's that? Is it Phil Collins? Did he sing? And
yes,
some of guys like that they were sort of the front man as well as the drummer, right?
But the legalities of it, I think, when it comes to copywriting and how a song is structured, it's based off of notes and harmony, and that doesn't. It's a different world when you get into drums. So there's a lot of bands that got really famous that the drummers just got nothing. One of my all-time favorite bands in the world, Slayer.
Yeah.
The drummer, Dave Lombardo, the original drummer, that band wouldn't have existed without him. And I ended up becoming friends with Dave. I still am. He really, he didn't get paid. And he helped create a sound that sold millions and millions and millions of albums. But a good drummer, like the best drummers in the world, most people don't know who they are, but you're listening to them all day. My niche, I found my niche as a sessions player, studio guy. So I would get hired to come in and play for a band, but that wasn't me. That wasn't my picture on the album. They kept their drummer. But especially back then, it's changed now because recording technology is getting cheaper. People are putting albums out on their phones.
So then why were they choosing you to do the session stuff and not the drummer from the band?
Because when you're recording, every nuance is picked up. Timing is everything. If you can't play to a click track as a drummer, you're not going to make it.
Mm.
And it's a difficult thing to do. It really is. If you don't, you can't just say, oh, I started playing drums a year ago, and it doesn't work like that. I mean,
Huh.
so time is money and in that industry. So they would bring somebody in. They're not, rather than this guy taking 3 weeks to do it, they just grab somebody like me, throw me a few $100 and a couple cases of beer, and I'll do it in one take.
Yeah.
And I was cheap back then. I wanted the gigs and I liked to play, so I took as many as I could. And it would save this. That's what the studios do, because it saves them a ton of money. And then of course, the songs are right, because if that timing fluctuates, if a fill lands in the wrong spot, something like that, the whole song is out of whack. And the listener will hear it. They won't know what they're hearing. When they hear something that's right, they don't know why they're hearing that as right. But when it's wrong, they definitely know it.
It's interesting, because you also hear these stories about studio sessions that happen, and like the famous one is like a Rolling Stone, the original, where you had the guy on the keyboard who didn't really know the chords, and it was behind everything, and so it had that dragging feel. Like, so you get that anecdotes about that, but usually that's not the case. You want to be nailing it. So is there a balance there? Is there a balance between, okay, Daly's like a robot. He's going to be on there, but then, is there any of your flourish? Is there any of your style that gets in there that gives it the soul? And
yes, but see, and that's where it gets tricky too, because there were projects I did that I got hired to do, and then the studio scrapped the whole thing because the drummer couldn't play it. So you can be too good in that sense. You can be too I should say.
And I mean, let's say but you're so consistent, like you're like hiring the machine, in that way. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but like when you're on, it's like it's clicking off. It's like, a distance runner who can run 25 laps around and they're right on that 60-second per mile, or 60-second per 400 meters or something like that. It's like you can set your clock to it, like you were that guy. But I don't want to discount the fact that like you're a human being, but 15 hours a day for 10 years, it makes a difference.
Yeah. And, and then some people just have it. I would see that all the time. And I'd be like, who is this kid? And you find out he's been playing how long? How'd that happen? And then some people just have it.
Yeah.
And it also depends on the project too. Like, you take a band like Led Zeppelin, they've sold over 300 something million albums. They're one of the biggest selling bands of all time. Never used a click track. It went against every rule as far as studio recordings, but the whole band worked that way. So when their timing fluctuated, they're riding that ride together. And that doesn't so much fly anymore, because the recording technology is so advanced. Again, every little nuance, everything, you pick it up now, and it has to be precise. And in some people, and some would argue it's too precise, it's too machine-like, and it's starting to take the human element out of it.
That's what people used to talk about, like, pop music, like in the 80s. Like there was no soul. It was just, it all become, sort of like this, electronic, no soul feel, or that's how some people described it back then. And of course, things evolve over time. But for you, the session was the niche. But were there particular bands that you really connected with and had a relationship with over time?
I always had my own projects. I was in love with heavy metal. The heavier it was, the better it was, because that genre and what ended up becoming what they call death metal, for a drummer, all that is modern jazz. The drummer got to do as much as they wanted to. You can go as crazy and as creative and do anything you wanted to. The problem was, it always sounded like the Cookie Monster was singing. So and that part used to drive me crazy, you know.
Everything else was great except for that.
But as a drummer, the timed signature changes and the patterns and a lot of the progressions, I mean, it was just, you could be incredibly creative, and it really was just modern day jazz. That's what was happening. But it was the vocals that used to kill me. It was, you know, I just tune it out. You know, they're up there with the, you know, like singing out of the gates of hell, and me, I was mentally, I thought I was in the Beatles or Zeppelin. That's what I would envision. But I stuck with that genre. You get into something and you end up sticking with it. I probably could have done a lot better financially, but I stayed in a genre that, you know, a lot of, in that world, those bands were well known. You know, I would tour, you know, sign autographs, that kind of thing, but there was no money involved.
Yeah.
I mean, you barely were able to eat. I mean, if you got off the road and you looked at the end of the day and you're like, wow, I made $200 a week on this tour. And
Well,
and I spent it all.
Yeah, I mean, $200 went further back then than it does now, but it's still $200.
Right, it wasn't much money.
You know, especially now. Where were you based during these years?
At that time in Florida, and my friend Gar Samuelson was the drummer for a band called Megadeth.
Right.
And I would tech for him and anything he needed. And I would use his studio. And I played in a band where his engineer was my guitarist. So that ended up really helping. And I was in awe of him. I mean, to this day, I feel like that guy changed American music. He changed heavy metal. That band came out in an era where the founder of it was one of the original members of Metallica, and then he was fired, and then he started that band, and then it created this whole thing we call heavy metal and speed metal and all that.
There's a lot of stories about that guy, because like, I mean, hey, you know, no, you left Metallica, or you're, you know, but Megadeth isn't so bad either, you know, and probably from a creative standpoint, you know, again, not being the expert in heavy metal in any way, shape, or form, but you know, maybe he followed his path more genuinely than he would have otherwise.
Yeah, and it's a crazy life, you know. It's you don't have to grow up, and believe me, none of them do. You go to the party at age 15, and
I don't think anybody wants to be a rock star to be responsible. I don't. I'd be like, you know what? I'm a rock star, and I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock every night, and you know.
But it really is. It's you go to the party and you stay there.
Yeah. And
years go by, and for some it works out well. For most, it don't. You know, you got to love what you're doing, though. It can't be about money. But when your band all of a sudden does something like that band did, now it's a business. There's handlers, there's managers, there's accountants, there's crews, there's huge payroll. There's a lot that goes into it, and then you've got a bunch of undisciplined young men, in the case, the such scenarios I was in. Hardly any of them had anything past a 9th or 10th grade education, and all of a sudden you got a bunch of money, and things can change and go the wrong way quickly. And you know, I watched most of my friends come and go before they hit 35, you know. It is that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's a rough one.
How did you get through it? Well, I mean, I say maybe that's not the right term, how to get through it, but you know, at some point you may have had to face that.
Yeah, I mean, in my circle of friends, I was one of the craziest of the craziest. And that is the truth. I mean, I was crazy. I would do things that, you know, hey, watch this, guys, open the door to the bus and jump out in the middle of the highway. You know, I mean, crazy stuff. We thought we were invincible. Just, you know, you look back and you're like, oh my God, why am I still alive? You know, I was one of those. It was, you live in the moment, and when
Mhm.
you're young, you don't see past the tips of your feet.
Mm.
Everything's right
Do you
there.
ever like really wonder that? And yeah, I mean, you kind of joke it, but like a lot of your close friends didn't make it. You did. Do you ever think about, sort of purpose or like, why were they chosen not to make it, and you did crazier stuff than them, but here you are, so do you ever think about that, or is that,
All the time.
yeah.
uh and I had people that, I was different. I wasn't looking for to be the cool guy in the crowd. uh I didn't want to be around large groups of people, and uh I always had one or two other people in the band, because mainly because of my ability on drums. They would almost take the role of being my handler,
Mm.
and I was tough on a few of them. In particular, my friend Greg, I won't say his last name, but uh and Greg, he did a lot of stuff. And I remember when he had to leave, he was working on Gar Samuelson's album. He was working on an album for Enrique Iglesias, and I think he worked on one of Keith Richards' solo albums as an engineer. But poor Greg, I mean, he had to be basically my handler, and that was no easy job for
Mm.
anybody.
I mean, what do you have to do? Was it like, um, I look at, because you had been through so much, and yet you were you were rebellious all the way through, and even among that crew,
Oh yeah.
it was kind of like, when you're around a bunch of rock stars and they all look over and say, "Hey, we got to do an intervention on this guy." I mean, that you got to get, not that, but you were, what I'm saying, like, and not that you were
No,
that
but
guy.
it was crazy. It was crazy.
When all the rock stars are around and they're like, "Yeah, we got to do something about Bob over here,"
Yeah, and uh, everybody wanted to play in a band with me until they got me in their band,
Mm.
and then it was like, oh my god, how do we get rid of them? How do we get rid of them? Because they thought they were crazy until they met somebody who took that to a level that I there was when I first got my first real apartment in Fern Park, Florida. There was a in the death metal world of those bands, the band that really started it all was a band called Death. So I moved into this apartment complex called Regency Granada Apartments. And who ends up being my next door neighbor? Chuck Schuldner, the founder and singer of the band Death. And so I'm hanging out by the pool one night, and he had a pet iguana that he would take down to the pool and let it go swimming. And we just ended up becoming good friends, and we'd sit there and drink beer. And, I was like, wow, this is Chuck. And, but one night, everybody was looking for me. And across 436 was a highway there. And across the highway, there was this little, I forget the name of it. It was a bar. And back then they used to do certain nights like beer specials. And this was 25-cent drafts from 5 to 6. And then, 6 to 7, they're 50 cents, and it goes up. So I would go over there, I'd get a booth, and I would sneak up to the bar, and I'd grab the plastic cups, and I'd spread them out around the booth, and I'd sit there, and I'd put a jacket over there, a shirt over there, so I could get as many of these 25-cent beers as I could. So I was ordering 6 or 7 at a time. And one night they're looking for me, and I was trying to crawl my way back across 436 to get across the road. It
Mm.
was just one of those. It was crazy stuff, where just crazy stuff.
Wow.
And it had gotten to a point though where I realized, okay, it's got to stop.
Mhm.
Because Chuck offered me the gig with his band, and I did something, and I forgot. I don't even know what I did. I did something in his living room one night, and all I know is the next day he said it's not going to work out.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So I was going to say, like, was there a seminal moment or something that made you sort of reflect, and you missed out on a very good opportunity?
Yeah, I
because of
realized
it.
I got to stop rebelling against everything.
Mm.
And that's more what it was than it wasn't so much the drinking. It was I would that none of that's to the drinking or any of the drugs we took back then or any of that. Those weren't the issues for me. But if it was if I showed up at a party and somebody had a keg of beer there, I'm not leaving until either I'm unconscious or that keg is empty because I'm getting my money's worth. And then me being me, there would always be something crazy
Yeah.
that was happening. You know, they'd
Yeah.
be looking for me and maybe I'd be naked on top of the roof doing some kind of rain dance or something, you know,
Mm.
and it was one of those things. Anything I could, when people say they want shock value, I went for real shock value and people don't,
Mm.
it shocked people,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but it was more like, and all this happened before the age of 21.
Mm.
So that's when I started to make some changes there, and I ended up in the Carolinas, and then and a few years went by, and then back down to Florida again. And meanwhile, traveling all over the place. I mean, I'd wake up in, you know, New Orleans or Texas, or I was all over the place.
Mm.
But it's still, I just still stayed focused on the music.
Mm.
And
it's interesting because you're so young, and you know, as people hear these stories, they're like, "Oh, wow!" But then, when you think about your own, not you know, any individual's childhood, and they think about the youth, there is often this sort of rebelliousness, but usually it's sort of in a certain confine. You know, there are guardrails there. Like you didn't have the guardrails. You know, you not only had you know a situation where you didn't even have necessarily this anywhere near the stable household as a lot of people have, not all of course, but you know, in traditional families, but also then you're put into this world where it's no holds barred. And you know, so you know, to me it's like, wow, you were young. I mean, not only were you young in age, but I mean, yeah, I mean, those were your young years.
yeah, and I mean, by the time I was 21, I felt old. I mean, I
Mm.
really felt old. I had seen things, done things, experienced things that, you know, and I had friends that, you know, or I shouldn't say friends, but people I grew up with, they were still in college.
Mm.
And I felt like I'd already been around for 100 years,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, you lived some life. You know, you know, and some of it really not so good. A lot of it probably pretty good. But at 21, yeah, other kids are still kids.
Right.
You weren't a kid anymore.
I feel like I never was, you know,
Mm.
that kind of missed me.
Mm.
I mean, I went at age 11 right into pure survival mode.
Mm.
So, and that does change everything, you know, because I was always thinking about how am I going to get clothes, you know, how am I going to eat, how am I going to do those things.
Mm.
So those are, you know, when you're thinking that way, it's hard to think about, I want to ask this girl out, or I'm saving up for a bicycle, or, you know, whatever. I needed to live.
The normal
Yeah.
kid kind of things. You missed all that, huh?
And you don't realize it till way later on in life.
Mm.
You know, you get head down a path and you kind of stay on that path. And then it all started to change for me, but the music thing stayed consistent. I'd drop it a few times. And I ended up getting a telemarketing job one time.
No kidding.
I had to get a job. So they're like, I walked into this place and I was like, I'll try, you know, I couldn't do it. Right. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can't do this. This ain't working. And it was raising money for the police organization. Right. So the last day, my boss comes up to me and he says, man, I like you, Mike, and I'm trying to help you out and everything. If you can't get any money, if you can't get anything on the board, I'm going to have to let you go. So they switch us over to this other area and I'm trying, and it was weird how this worked out. It was like maybe 2 or 3 phone calls, and you know, you're on a predictive dialer. So, you know, it's the name comes up on the screen. You're just like, hi, Mr. Jones, blah, 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 blah. You know? So this guy answers, and I just go right into my pitch, expecting him to just hang up the phone, and he says, yeah, how about $100? And I'm scrambling, like, what am I supposed to say?
Right. Now what do I do?
So I get his information, and I was shaking, that was like, somebody's gonna give me money. And it was a legit thing, it was, that's how they do that. That's how they raise those, because a cop can't call you, and it's against the law for them to use their badge to solicit money. So, this guy, and then I said, all right, so when you get it in the mail, just make sure you send your money back, and he's like, great. And will you be at the picnic Sunday? And I look at the guy, who was monitoring my call. I go, and he goes, just say yes. And I said, yeah, I'll see you Sunday. So, so he high fives me, and everybody's like, good job, Mike finally made you don't want to call it a sale, but whatever it was, and I'm like, oh my God, I might not get fired today. And then the very next call, I'm like, hey, this is Mike Daly with, the Fraternal Order of Police or whatever it was, and I said, how much can we put you down for? Oh, Mike, why don't you go ahead and put us down for, is 50 okay? And that was the next call. And I said, yeah, that'll be great. And every call started going that route. What I didn't realize, which we all found out later on, the sheriff of that county that we were calling's name was Mike Daly. But it had instilled so much confidence in me that night that I was like, this is easy.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized it's you, it's whatever you're doing. And that spun me into a world of sales.
That's
if that makes any sense. I mean,
well, I mean, once you get that taste, right?
Yeah.
And how did you actually end up with that telemarketing firm? Because you were doing your drumming thing, and then
they would let me take time off if I needed to, and ironically, I ended up advancing with that company to where they were sending me. I got so good at what I did that then the Shriners picked me up. And they would send me to Shriners temples all over the country.
Yeah, you got bumped up to the big leagues.
Yeah. So I became known at that point as like the drumming telemarketing dude, I guess, because I got so good at fundraising. The FOP sent me over to the PBA. The PBA, somebody there contacted someone at the Shriners, and then they were sending me all over the country. And I'd go to Shriners temples and set up a call room for them, and we'd go in and we'd call, and it was either like sometimes it was a fish fry fundraiser, or the Shriners Circus, or the Joey Chitwood Auto Thrill Show. I remember those. And it was always an event you're raising money for.
Yeah.
And I crushed it. I mean, and it ended up that over those years, I mean, I raised hundreds of millions of dollars for FOPs, PBAs, drug-free school zone projects, Shriners, burn centers, all that stuff. And then of course I would be able to take time off and go back to pursuing what I wanted to do.
Which is the drumming. But how long did you do the telemarketing thing?
Years.
So you were kind of, did you evolve from, you were the guy on the phone, but then you were like sort of managing some of that.
Yeah. I ended up over, my last, I think first they sent me to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where I had my first office that was my own, and I oversaw 65 employees and learned management skills and got really good at it. And then when they would send me into new offices, they just knew they had a new boss coming that day. And I did not look like, I didn't look like what anybody was expecting. So what I would do when I'd come into a new office is I would go in and I'd just sit down. And usually somebody would come up to me and ask me who I was. And I'd say, you guys got an application or anything around here? And I would sit there and I'd fill out an app, and I would sit there and watch them. And I'd look at the clock and I'd say, all right, well, there's no boss here, obviously, because it's me. 9 o'clock hits, no one's getting on the phone and working. 9:30, and I just pay attention to what they're doing while they're left unsupervised. And then I'd get up and I'd fire half the room, and start from scratch and build a new office. And that was a tactic I used almost everywhere they sent me,
Mm.
and got really good at it.
Mm.
I enjoyed it. I mean, I really did, because when you have an office running smoothly and people doing what they're supposed to be doing, scheduling is right, you know, people used to call me, and, you know, especially in that line of work, you know, they'd call me, oh, I can't come in. My grandmother died. And I'd say, well, thank God your grandmother doesn't work for me, you know, because that's the 5th grandmother that died this week. And it was always that, you know, you'd hear that excuse, and I started to learn that, like, quickly, how much people will lie to you if you're their boss. They will lie to you all day long to get out of work.
Mm.
And because the first office I was given was taken away from me, I screwed up. I couldn't handle it.
Mm. What happened?
I was just in over my head, and everyone took advantage of me. I couldn't keep numbers up. People were calling in constantly, and I would buy into every excuse.
Mm.
And I'd say, oh, well, just make sure you get here tomorrow. You know, I was one of those. Please, man, I'm going to get in trouble. And you realize quickly you can't do that.
You got to set expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you really got to put the hammer down sometimes, and they got to know I'm your boss and this is a job, and you do your job or you don't work here, period. You know, and I wasn't mean, but, you know, when you run it the right way, people know, you know. So I would, you know, because of the people that trained me, I would put in a strict dress code. If your socks didn't match your tie, I'd send you home for the day. I mean, I strict, and no one understood that. They'd go, why do we have to do this? No one's going to see us. And I'd say, that's part of your job. That's your uniform. You have to do that.
Now, how did you dress during that time?
I wore a suit every day.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Picture that.
I wore a suit every single day. And got really into it. I started, you know, because I had some money, so I'd go out and buy like nice Armani suits and stuff like that. And I started to really like dressing that way. I started making a little bit of a shift in life from where I was, because up until then, I never wore anything except jeans. I had hair down to my waist and concert t-shirts, stuff like that, you know. So it was, I learned a lot working from them. It was a whole, you know, things that I missed, you know.
And when did that, what was that time frame, and when did that finish up for you?
Late 90s. I started to freak out. I said, what am I doing here? You know, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I wear ties every day. And I had a panic attack moment. You know, I freaked out. And
you're the man. You're working for the man.
Yeah.
Did that, like, you know, I mean, the rebellious Mike Daly, you know, all of a sudden had this career where, you know, was much more respectable. Did that bother you?
No, but it got to be where I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't having fun. I didn't have time for anything. I worked 100-hour work weeks. I was shipped all over the place. So you had no stability as far as friends, girlfriends, that kind of thing, because you're in and out of town constantly. And my whole life was that way. There was,
when I was gonna say, there hasn't been much where, you know, you've really, you know, stayed anywhere one place for a very long time, you know, even in your youth, you know, from home to home and such.
Yeah, I think up until almost 30, the longest I was ever in one place would have been, you know, I guess home. But and even then, you know, because for me, age 3 to 6, I was in Boston Children's Hospital, which was a whole different thing too, you know, because I would wake up, and almost every night one of the kids, you know, one of my friends would be gone, he'd pass away in the middle of the night. Or, you know, I saw that so many times as a little kid. And I do remember my dad would like sleep in a chair sometimes next to my bed. And one night I woke up, and my dad goes, Michael, turn your head. I said, what's going on? He said, turn your head, just go back to sleep. And so I turned my head, pretending I was sleeping, but I could look, and I heard crying. And I saw that my friend, this little girl, I saw her mother like on the floor, just uncontrollably crying. And I sat up, and before my father could sit me back down, I saw that, she was gone. The little girl had died.
So you're at Boston Children's Hospital uh, when you were very young. What was going on?
Both my lungs collapsed.
Hmm.
So I spent a year in an oxygen tent, and then, constant, having lungs drained and tubes. And so it was years from BMC back to Boston Children's, and I spent a solid year in an oxygen tent. I remember the Santa Claus guy, they had the tent you could put your hands in, and he would try, he could, I don't know how that works, but he would get me a candy cane. I remember that this guy dressed up as Santa, I thought it was Santa, giving me a candy cane, but I couldn't come out of that tent or else I'd suffocate. And that lasted a long time. And then it was a few years of therapy, that you have to go through. And ironically, after going through all that, when stuff went bad, I started drinking and smoking by the time I was 10, which is crazy to have your lungs go through that. And,
Yeah.
because there was a few years there where it was constant inhalers, medications, and all that. And yeah, so there was that part of it too. I left that out in the beginning, but I think that probably, every friend I had passed away. I mean, I would watch them, at Boston Children's Hospital, we'd have like big wheels and stuff with our IV poles, or, I always had an oxygen, and we would, race up and down the hallways and stuff. But most of those kids were never leaving. So that bothered me, I think, because every time I made a friend, they passed away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk about, being afraid of sort of attachments later on, whether it's foster families or maybe not afraid, but you seem to avoid attachments. Probably that has something.
Yeah. I'm almost still a little like that. A lot of people think I'm incredibly like outgoing, outward, and not at all. I mean, not at all. Quite the opposite. I spend, even now, a good day for me is out in the woods with a bunch of animals and my cameras.
Yeah.
But yeah, I prefer that now, and it's I feel better that way. It's weird. A lot of people don't understand that, but that's I just feel more comfortable around animals.
No, I mean, listen, they sometimes they're easier to deal with.
Yes.
than human beings. But yeah, I think it certainly is understandable. And you've been through a lot. You've been through a lot, and in those formative years, when every minute that you are of age before you're 7 years old, I think I mean those are years that are just like hugely influential on on who we are and how we're built. So it's amazing.
But that was the other side of it too, like with the drumming, in the hospitals, you're stuck in a bed in an oxygen tent. So I was always on a practice pad. What else are you gonna do? So there was that part too. So that probably, the drumming was just, it kept my mind on something else. Otherwise, even now, like I have a little bit of claustrophobia. It probably,
maybe, but I was thinking you were also in that storage container, and I don't know how big that was.
It was
but
big. 15, okay, 15 by 20. That was the best you could get for $60 a month.
And then I definitely wanted to ask you about your dad, because that relationship obviously was complicated.
Yep.
He's passed on, but you did reunite.
Yep.
With him
when I was in my late 20s. I was close to 30, and I came back home, or here. I moved back to this area. Had a house in Canaan, New York, and met, at that time, now my ex-wife, but I had just met her, and it was time for me and my father to sit down and figure out what the hell happened. And we did. And he just passed away a few months ago, but the last 20 years for us, we were like best friends. We put all that behind us, and it took a while. I mean, it took some screaming, yelling, getting it out, but we did. We figured it out, and that was huge for me. That had to happen, and I was very fortunate because my father was in his 40s when he had me. He was, my dad was almost 20 years older than my mother, and so I was lucky that he was still around for that to be able to happen.
Hmm. And was it tough? I mean, who made the approach?
I did.
You did. Um, and it's interesting because whenever these relationships and whatever happened, sometimes it just it kind of snowballs and maybe gets bigger, or maybe over time you just say, what the hell were we not talking for? So what was that like, and what were maybe some of the things that you needed to break through?
It was just very complex, because my mom left when I was about 10 or 11, I guess 11. And I had never, that was it. I never lived with her again or anything like that. So, and my dad, I think being older, and now here he was in his 50s with 3 kids, three, and me and my siblings, there's only 3 years between all 3 of us. So, in hindsight, my father, he was this guy in his 50s, and he's like, oh, probably thinking, what the hell did I get myself into? I got 3 kids. Yeah. And he did the best he could, but he had to work 2 jobs. So my dad was working 18, 19 hours a day, which left nowhere there for, and me being the type of person I am, or I was the type of kid I was, I wandered. It was easy for that to happen. There wasn't a lot of structure, and it was different than it would be now. And the Pittsfield public school systems was not of help to me. So they just tossed me from school to school to school. I went to every school, and when they couldn't handle me, because I would get in a lot of fights and stuff like that, and so they'd kick me out. I was really, really rough on the other kids. And I don't think a lot of them knew why. Not that they should have either. But I would see what they had, and it made me mad, so I would take it out on them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's exactly, it'd be when people grow up, they're like, oh, there's Mike, he's a bully, he's this, he's that. But yeah, hell no, they didn't clearly. And I think, I mean, there you are. There's the human experience.
Yeah, and those before I permanently had left Pittsfield when I was young like that. They'd, you could find me at 3 a.m. on a bench on North Street or in a doorway, and a young rookie police officer by the name of Karen Kalinowski she would look out. She was a great human being. Karen is, she fosters kids. I mean, I love Karen to death for that reason. I know what kind of person she is. She's true through and through. She has a heart bigger than you can imagine. And so there were some people, like, they'd bring me over to the police station all the time and didn't know what to do with me back then. And so and then in the morning, someone would go over and get me French toast or something from Burger King, and then off you go. I'd have to go for the day. And that's why, for Pittsfield, I said, I got to get out of here. I couldn't do it anymore. So at that point, I mean, if I could have tied feathers to my arms and tried to fly away, I would have. I just wanted out. So that's why I convinced my friend Steve. I was like, oh, I got a mansion for us and everything in Florida. It's going to be great.
Yeah, timeshare for you in Florida. So, after the marketing gig, is that when you came back to Pittsfield? And then you say there's an ex-wife.
Yep.
So how did you meet her?
I started playing music again, and was in a band that was doing really well. And we were heading into the studio, getting ready to do an album. And I met her. She worked at the Crown Plaza. And next thing I know, I was like, take it easy, guys. I'm getting married.
Just like that.
Pretty much, yeah. And everybody was mad, obviously, but they were trying to do something.
Oh, you mean you took off on the band?
Yeah, I just quit. I said, I'm
Yeah.
done. I'm done. We the last show we played, there was a band called Shinedown. We were opening for Shinedown in Albany, and the guys from Shinedown offered. They were looking for a drummer at that time, which made the guys I was playing with, which were Pittsfield guys, they were mad. They were like, "This ain't cool." And what none of them knew is, I already knew. I was done. Because for the first time ever, my eyes were going with hearts coming out of them. I was the blinders were on.
You got stupid.
Yep.
You got stupid. Before you were just rebellious. And then you got
I was
just kidding.
I was
hey,
in love.
Love is a great thing. Even if it doesn't always turn out the way you want it to.
Right.
Nothing like it.
But when that feeling hits you, everything else goes away. That was it. I was like, I don't care. I'll walk through fire. I'll drain the ocean. I'll do whatever I got to do. So that's what happened. And I got rid of the place in Canaan, and she had been here her whole life. And I said, well, you want to go to North Carolina? And she said, sure. So that's what happened. And went down there. It was hard for me to walk away from music because I didn't know what else to do. That was the other problem. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't good at anything else.
I mean, was it a prerequisite that, like, if I get married, I can't do music anymore, or,
I said that. Well, yeah, you can't.
You just can't because of the
You
lifestyle,
can't,
or
I wouldn't have been home.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't have come home with any money when I did. So that wasn't going to help. So I took a job working for Guitar Center, and they hired me as a manager of their drum department. And that, combined with the sales skills I had picked up, I excelled, and I rose right to the top. I mean, I was promoted to management almost immediately. And I think my third week there, I alone, as a salesperson, and anybody who's ever worked for that company knows that this is nearly impossible, because drum sales are just like a complimentary thing for that chain. Those sales don't equal up to hardly anything of what the company does. You know what I mean? You're like, selling,
guitars, I assume.
Yep.
Big deal.
Macs, turntables, all that stuff. So drums, you got to have very cool parents, and there's a lot that goes into being able to even start playing that instrument. Because if you have neighbors, if you have siblings, if you have anybody in earshot, they're going to want to kill you soon. So, but anyway, my third week there, I alone, July 5th, the day after a holiday, I outwrote the entire store. I sold $23,000 or something like that in gear on a Sunday after the 4th of July, and immediately caught the attention of everybody in the company. And excelled at that. And I stayed with Guitar Center. And the funny thing is one day they went to promote me, and I said, don't promote me. I don't want to be promoted. They thought I was joking. So they held this big meeting in the front of the store before opening, and to announce that I was going to be a key holder, which is a big deal with their company, And so they're, I guess, calling me or whatever. And then next thing I know, my phone rings, and it's one of the managers there. And he says, Mike, where are you? Come to the front of the store. I said, I can't do that. And he said, why? I said, because I'm drinking a beer. I'm home. I told you not to promote me. They thought I was joking. They promoted me, and I quit. So,
hey, why didn't you want to get promoted, first of all? And then, but you also quit in the process.
It wasn't so much. I think what it was is I asked him not to. And I don't even know how serious I was when I asked him not to. But because they did, I don't know why that offended me.
Well, because you're rebellious, and
something most people would be excited about.
Yeah.
So they were confused.
Yeah.
So they ended up calling me back, and I came down and talked to them, and I let them, but they didn't demote me, but they let me stay as just a department manager in drums where I wanted to be and selling.
Okay, so you stuck with it.
I ended up, yeah, I ended
Okay.
up going back. And then a bunch of years went by, whatever, and got divorced and moved back. And that brought me here right in the middle of Dan Bianchi versus city clerk Linda Tyre. So I've always had a huge interest in politics, obsessed on it. Don't know why, but I've always, everywhere I've lived, I've followed, like my friends would be out at the bars and stuff, and I'd be watching city or town council meetings wherever I lived. And all my friends thought I was nuts. They were like, dude, how do you watch this stuff? you know, I was just obsessed with that
In
stuff.
between the crazy shenanigans of going across highways and such, there were
Yes.
local community access.
Yes, I was right there. I was cut out to be a politician. But yeah, so I came back here, and that election was just starting. And I decided I wanted to be a photographer. That's how recent the photography thing had started.
2015.
Yeah. So I said, I want to be a photographer. What do I got to do? Well, for one, I got to buy a camera. So I went to the mall in Lanesboro, and Best Buy was going out of business, and they had one Nikon camera in a box. I didn't even know what it was. It was the only thing they had left, and it said 50% off.
I was telling Mark Rosinski that the Nikon that he sold me is right there because I worked it up and hacked it so I could use it for the podcast. But yeah, Nikons were a big deal over at Best Buy. I don't know if Mark Rosinski sold it to you. Probably not.
It was the last thing on the shelf.
It was the last thing on the shelf. It really, you don't need to sell it. If someone was going to buy it, they just had to walk in and get it. Probably what was a half off or something.
Yeah, it was 50% off, and it was a kit. It came with a bag, a camera, and 2 lenses. So I said, I'll take it. I didn't even open it. I didn't even want it. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know what was, So I bought it, and I went down to on North Street. Linda Tyre had a campaign office there. And I walked in, and I forget, there was some woman there, and I said, yeah, are you guys by any chance looking for a photographer for your campaign? And she said, I think we're all set on that, something to that effect. And she said, but we're definitely, we could use your help. Why don't I get your name and number? Would you be interested in maybe making some phone calls or, bringing signs out? And I said, no. I was hoping that you guys were looking for a photographer or something like that. And she was very nice, whoever it was. I didn't know anything about the campaign or anything. I didn't know who anybody was. I just wanted to try to get into something, So that didn't work out. And so I went down to Elm Street, and Dan Bianchi had a office there. And I walked in, and I said, is there any chance that you guys are looking for a photographer? And it was a woman named Teresa. It turned out being the mayor's wife. And she said, we were just talking about that. Are you a photographer? And I said, oh yeah. That thing was still in my car. I hadn't even taken it out of the box yet. And I said, oh yeah. And she said, oh great. And have you done a lot of stuff? I said, oh yeah, I've been doing this for forever. So that was it. And the next thing I know, I'm taking pictures, and they're using those photos to make mailers and flyers. And I said, there, now I'm official. I'm published.
There you go.
And then when I saw my photos on a billboard and in the paper, I was like, yeah, I'm a professional photographer. And then so I obsessed on it, and I said, well, I got to learn this thing in and out. So I just studied and studied and studied. And, fast forward to now, and that Nikon, now there's 10 of them, a lot nicer than that one. And I just went all in with it, and fell in love with it.
What is it about the process that you love in the photography? And again, a lot of nature photography. That's really definitely one of your niches that you have as far as photography. I'm sure there's more, but what about photography do you love?
it's a living painting.
Mm.
It's you know, I'm always fascinated, like you could have 30 people taking a picture of the exact same thing, and somebody's going to have that picture in a way that you're all looking at it going, and I've always been fascinated how people look at things differently. So I see something, I don't know, I look for that moment in something. It's I paint and I draw too. I've always done that. So uh I just look at it from that way. I look at it as like you're not just pushing a button, you're creating something, and how, where that is, how you frame it, what the subject is doing, where it is, all that comes into play, the colors, the shadowing, the where the light is, you know. I just I see it that way. I see it the same way as writing a song or drawing a picture. Uh, you just have to channel everything out and just look at it. And you know when you see something,
Mm.
you know. And I was drawn to it because I'd take pictures and then I go home. And of course, with DSLRs, you don't have to worry about film or nothing. So you can take thousands of pictures and, you know, just to get that one good shot. So I would go through my stuff and then I'd get a night. I'd go, oh, if I did this or I did that. And then I started thinking, well, what if I hung upside down from that branch over the water and I used the reflection if the sun's coming this way, and I could get a reverse image off the reflection of the water of the, you know, the top of the mountain over there. And I started trying things like that.
Mm.
And just, I don't know, it's just like painting a picture. It's addictive.
Mm.
And, you know, next thing I know, I'm chasing bears around and running after animals. And, you know, I can't tell you how many bears I've chased where
Yeah.
the
And you've been
bears,
published in publications, magazines, and such with some of this wildlife.
yeah,
Particularly the bears. People dig the bears.
within a couple of years of taking photos, I mean, I made National Geographic, I made the cover of Outdoor Life, I made the cover of the Maine Sportsman, I made Mass Wildlife a few times. And then they all started saying, Mike Daly, one of New England's premier wildlife photographers. And, you know, of course, all my friends are like, Daly, what are you doing now, dude? You know, I mean, that's just how it happened. I just went in 100%. And, you know, same with this It's Pittsfield Tonight thing. I mean, that's that all, it started on a fluke. It was not, there was nothing planned. It wasn't like, I'm going to do this. And I'm going
I
to
think the first time that I saw It's Pittsfield, you were with someone else on the air. So it was you and somebody else, wasn't it? Was it a duo at first?
I brought a couple friends and my friend Candace I dragged along. And then, you know, poor girl, because one day she calls me and she sees one of my videos and she's like, hey, get that off of there with me. And she's like, I gotta work with these, like, oh, and I felt so bad. I really did, because, you know, if I see something I don't like, there is no filter. I'm going to tell you. If you're doing something that I think is wrong, I don't care who you are. I'm going to tell you. And sometimes, you know, for some people, that's not cool. You know, they're like, I live here, I work here, like, easy. But I don't roll that way. I react.
So before you had to do the process to actually, you set up a camera and the idea has to come. And so It's Pittsfield Tonight. What was that genesis? Like at what point or what inspiration were you like, hey, I want to do this? What was it?
Well, when I first started, I had this idea of, because I was messing around with the cameras. And then after taking pictures, you're like, hey, these DSLRs take video. So then that opened a whole new door. And I'm like, oh, what can I do with that? And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to make my own variety show. So I had the flu real bad in like 2017, 2018. And I was stuck home. And I started reading on how to keyframe, how to green screen. And I thought, that's interesting. What's that all about? And then I thought, wait a minute, I can start doing all this stuff from here. So I wrote a bunch of songs, and I play 24 instruments. So I wrote a bunch of songs, and and then I'm not a singer, but I said, screw it. I'm going to sing anyways. I can't sing to save my life, but I'm going to do it anyways. And I'm going to make these videos, and then I'm going to do a stand-up bit, and then I'm going to do some acting, and I'll play all the characters, which I did. And I said, I'll make this 30-minute variety show. So I did. And I said, live from the Pittsfield Thunderdome. And I took a picture of the dome over PHS, and I cropped that out of the photo, and then set it on top of a fictional building. And I put this It's Pittsfield Tonight thing out, and it was me telling jokes and playing music, and that was it. I mean, there was nothing, had nothing to do with any kind of politics or anything. And it would take me about 18 to 20 hours a day to be able to do one of those in 6 days, to get it out every Friday. And my friends were like, Mike, what are you doing? And I would stay up. I'd sleep 3 to 4 hours, and I just started making a whole entire show. I'd write skits, I'd plan everything out, and then I'd have to film it, figure out how to do all this. And I did all that. And the Berkshire Museum was getting that whole controversy of deassessing their collection.
So you probably started and maybe had done a handful of
I'd say maybe
episodes?
4 or 5 of those.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of work. And
right. And that's the thing, because
good.
it's kind of like this cost benefit analysis at some point where, as you tweak the process, you're like, okay, so I'm putting X amount of time into this, and we have the technology to maybe spend a little bit less time on the front end and produce more content on the back end. You know what I'm saying? So if you're spending all that time to create you're saying it wasn't good. I mean, I can't remember those early episodes, but I think the one with Candace, maybe really early on.
Yeah.
But so I'll take your word for it but that's part of the process. When you start, you don't really know what it's going to look like. You just have to start and just keep rolling with it.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people, like, you can't embarrass me. I don't care. I have strong personal faith. So there's no human being alive that you're just another one of me, man. There's not one of us are less than the other one, and not one of us are more than the other one. Mm-hmm. So my personal faith guides me in where I believe after I leave this world. That's all that matters to me. I gotta answer to somebody. And it's not even answer. It's just, it's everything I do here, I got to own it. And that's what I take with me. There's nothing else you can take with you. There's no U-Hauls being pulled behind a hearse. There's none of that. Yeah. It's just you know.
There are lessons. There are, I mean, I don't know what your spiritual perspective is. Some people believe that, where this is just our life before the next life, there's right. That. Yeah. And I, but that whole idea that we're all, you hear that a lot. We're all in this together. That's often used but in consciousness and we really are. I mean,
oh yeah.
This is life.
Really short stay, it's a really short stay here. So for me, I mean, I really don't, if you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. I don't care. It's none of my business what other people think of me. It isn't. That's your deal. That's not mine. So I'm one of those, I don't care. I mean, I'll go put on a tutu and tap dance in front of people. I don't care if that's what I want to do. So that variety show thing, I was like, I'm going for it, man. I was singing and dancing, and I was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And people were like, what are you doing? But I just wanted to see if I could. I wanted to see if I could do it. And, I put it, once you, as you put yourself out there, not everybody's going to be so kind. Mm-hmm. So after doing a few of those episodes, the Berkshire Museum was deassessing their collection, and that bothered me. As an artist, that bothered me. So I went up there just to hold some signs with some people, and somebody said, are you that guy from the It's Pittsfield Tonight thing? And I was like, yeah, you know who I am? I had like 300 followers. And he was like, yeah, I laughed my ass off. That was funny, man. That was great. And I was like, really? You like that?
You're like, I didn't even like that. I was, but that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's,
So
you know,
he gave me his phone number and everything. And he asked me, like, can I ask you some questions about cameras and stuff like that? I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna have your answer, but so a few days went by and he called me and he said, look, I was talking to some people in this one little group we have here. Is there any way you'd be interested in maybe doing a video talking about what's happening at the Berkshire Museum, since you have, you know, these cameras and the ability? And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I called my friend Candace and I said, you want to be in a video with me? And she said, doing what? And I said, just us sitting at a desk talking about what's happening at the Berkshire Museum. And we did. And a bunch of people was like, yeah, that was great. You know, you said this or that. And I'm like, okay. And it just went, and that turned into It's Pittsfield Tonight. And it did. And all the things that I experienced during that initial campaign, some good, some not good at all. It all kind of came together, like everything came together. You know, I'm like, oh, that must have been why I did that. Because I met some of the players and, you know, and then I learned quickly, I started to learn about the Pittsfield political,
sure.
I don't want to say system, but just the cliques here, how it works,
Sure.
who's involved. And then I started to try to join up with people. But everybody I was trying to join up with, it turned out for me, after a couple months, I'd go, nope, we're not on the same page. And then I started to realize, I don't know if I'm on the same page of anybody. And then the more I started to get passionate about some of the issues, I realized that, you know what, I'm on my own page right now and I'm going to keep it that way. And it just kept going from there. And then, of course, when it got all the way up to during COVID with the homeless shelter, that hit a soft spot with me. That hit a personal spot with me. I've been there, and I know what those people were going through. I lived that, you know. I know what it's like to dig for food in a dumpster. I know what it's like to go through all that. I know what it's like to have no place to sleep or not sleep for days on end because you just couldn't. There's no safe place to go. And, you know, I know all that. So I really knew what those people were going through. And they're just other people in a bad spot. And they were being treated to me like, you know, second-class citizens, that they weren't worthy. And that really changed things, because that's when I came out swinging. And as you know, that incident, it turned the city upside down that summer, as it should have, but it didn't do enough, because many of the people I met in that park, still a few of them died in there, you know. It didn't do enough. And I think that made me realize all these different skills, or whatever you want to call them, abilities that I have, that I learned, whether from it being playing in bands, from telemarketing, from taking pictures, it all started coming together in one format. And then maybe 2 years ago, I said, you know what? This is where I need to be. I can do some good for some people here. I can help some people. And when I saw that happen a few times, I absolutely knew.
I think I look at media outlets, and I recognize, because I was a reporter, that was my first job out of college, and did it for probably about 5 years or so. The landscape has changed really dramatically even since then, and that was only 22 years ago or so, where the media outlet that I worked for no longer exists. For example, we had 4 full-time reporters there at the North Adams Transcript. Then I moved on to go into radio, and in commercial radio in North Adams at the time, there were 4 full-time news reporters at the time. Those no longer exist, and the station is maybe a little bit more of a maybe a repeater, but a little bit more than that. They still have a standalone station there, but no news reporters. And the same could be said for the Berkshire Eagle. Now there was local ownership that took it over, and they wanted to boost up reporters, but all in all, there are fewer reporters there. iBerkshire's limited number of reporters, and so on and so forth. To me, I think that robust um, aspect of where media needs to be is just simply not doing their job. So when you have different media outlets that are committed to doing this kind of thing, even if it's not in the traditional journalism form, it's a desperately needed outlet, I think, for people. And, I think the cynics look at it and say, oh, well, it's social media and people just want to complain and so on and so forth. But you would hear that about anything.
Right.
You'd hear that about the letter to the editor page, years ago before social media. So that's a cynical view from a lot of people in power, because that's a tool
Absolutely.
that they use. It's something that they do in a way to sort of discredit. Maybe it's a little stronger term, but sort of reduce the strength of those kinds of outlets. But with that said, the landscape is different today because we don't have the media outlets and the strength and the numbers that was once the case. And I've seen it in my own career over time. So I feel as though even if when people don't necessarily agree with what you say, it's an outlet and it's a place for conversation. We need to have conversations.
Absolutely.
We need to have these conversations.
As long as you're being respectful, you can disagree. If everyone agreed with me, I would be seriously concerned because, I don't always agree with me. When people say things, oh, you flip-flop on this or you flip-flopped on that. No, I didn't. I found an issue that I obviously was passionate about. And like anything I do, I'm going to rip it apart. I'm going to dig into it and I'm going to rip it apart. And I'm going to stay on that until I know every little piece of that. And the more I learn, maybe my opinion might change on some things because you go, oh, that's why this is this, or that's why this is this. So you tweak it that way. When I decided It's Pittsfield Tonight is a real thing for me, that was it. I dropped everything. I took every last cent I had left and I dumped it into all gear. There was, like, during that time with what was happening at the park from the homeless shelter, I took every penny I had for groceries, everything. I was going right up until about 4 or 5 months ago. There were friends and business owners in this community come to my house, pick me up, and take me out to eat so I could eat that day. And, just up till recently. And to do It's Pittsfield Tonight, I worked sometimes 3-4 days straight because you got to do all the production. You got to go out there, you got to do the store. Plus I was going out and I was giving food to people and water, and I'm trying to organize all this stuff and trying to get it all done as one person, and then you have people saying, you're a fake journalist and you're a this, and and just when people say to me, like, when I address it in videos and people go, don't let that get to you, ignore it. No, what's in here right there is coming out right there. That's how I do it. In the heat of it, I'm going to let you know how I feel. It's not weakness. It's not somebody getting in my head. I am addressing it. Like the movie Reservoir Dogs, when I was a kid, I took a line from that and I still use it to this day. You're going to bark all day, little doggy, or you're going to bite. You either go in and you do it the right way, or you don't do it. And for me doing this, it was all in, like anything else I ever did. So It's Pittsfield Tonight became 100-hour a week or more, and I have lived it. And I went literally up until just a few months ago. I did this with no money. A couple times a year I would do GoFundMe's so I could boost and get promote these businesses and promote. And I never kept any of it for myself. I've given all of it right back every single time. And, that's why, when people would say, are you feeling okay? Why'd you lose all that weight? Well, dude, I was eating twice a week last year so I could do this. I left myself $30 a week for gas and food, and all the rest went back into It's Pittsfield Tonight, including donating it to some of these things. And, so that's where I would get frustrated, because when people would attack me, and not that they knew my side of it, nor should they, it wasn't their job to, but when they would attack me, like I was doing something wrong, and I'm not having that.
Yeah, and that's something I have a problem with also. But I mean, of course, everyone has the right to say whatever they want, of course. But the idea of a different voice having a different perspective that has a platform that you have created for yourself, and everyone has an opportunity to do something like that. I find that interesting that that people try to paint the picture a certain way. I look at it and say, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to what Mike Daly has to say. I may completely disagree with it, but I'm going to take that in, and that's going to be just part of the perspective. And maybe that will shift things, that the way I approach things a little bit. Maybe it won't, but to go after someone to say, oh, well, you're a fake. What does that even mean, a fake journalist? I mean, everybody has a voice, and to even say that all journalists are somehow magically objective, they're not. They're human beings. We have this sort of mid 20th century idea of journalism having to be quote unquote objective, but even that's a new phenomenon. At the end of the day, you have voices, and you have a legitimate voice in this community. So yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly that that's okay. That's okay to have.
And I'm not always going to be right. And when I am wrong, I'm the first one to get up and own it. I mean, of course I'm going to be wrong on things. And sometimes I might be super passionate about something, and then because I never stop researching whatever it is I'm doing in life, that's just how my brain works. I might be so passionate about something, I'll argue and say, John, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And then 3 weeks later, I go, oh my God, John was right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn around, I'm going to call you immediately, and I'm going to say, dude, I was wrong. I mean, you have to own it.
Yeah.
You make a mistake, you have to own it, because the best thing to learn from in life is mistakes. And if you're not willing to admit that you made one, you're not going anywhere. You're stuck in your own shoes. You're just there forever, because your pride or whatever it is about you that is putting that wall up, and you're not willing to, for whatever reason, say, I screwed up. How do I make this better?
Yeah.
When you clamp down and say, nope, I'm not letting go no matter what,
right,
you're going to lose. You have to adapt. It's not flip-flopping. It's not any of that. You have to adapt. And if you're like, I don't ever have to remember what I say, because I don't lie. So I don't care when people said, what if if you run for something, I don't even know if I'm gonna, for all I could run for mayor, or I could run for the bathroom. I have no idea. But if somebody says, what, aren't you afraid that they're going to go back and dig through all your videos? What if you said, I'll own everything I ever said. I don't care.
Yeah. There's a great amount of freedom that comes with complete and utter authenticity. And I think that's really important to recognize. I was having this conversation with Lee Davis the other day, and she's a select board member in Great Barrington, vice chair. And there's an interesting part of the interview that resonated with me. She said it really all clicked when I decided that I just don't care. And it sounds funny to say, oh, I just don't care. Well, of course you care. You care deeply about the community. You care about the issues. You care about people. But the not caring part is this sort of thick skin that says, throw what you got at me. There's like, I'm good, whatever you throw at me, because I have self-awareness as to what I'm doing, and I have faith and that I'm being honest and authentic. At that point, let the chips fall where they may. And I used to say this also, um, early on as a city councilor, because this whole idea of putting your finger in the wind and seeing where things, at some point you ultimately have to make a decision. And I said to myself a long time ago, if I make a vote or make a decision and I get voted out of office, well, so be it. And that's how it should be. And that's how it should be. If you believe you did the right thing, and it doesn't work out for you next election because of it, so be it. So be it. That's how it actually is supposed to work. Tough decisions sometimes mean there are consequences, and that's okay.
And all consequences, I mean, if you're there, you're supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. If you're out in the boat and the ocean gets rough and you get knocked out of the boat, some people might wait for someone to throw them a life jacket. As soon as I hit the water, it's like, well, now I'm a swimmer, I guess. And now I'm focused on that. You take where you're at and you make it the best you can, and you take it to the limit. As soon as you're comfortable, you're in dead water. That's how I feel with everything. As soon as I'm comfortable, then I'm not working hard enough.
Yeah, there is, and looking at this dynamic, to me, it's so important, and I think this goes from Pittsfield to Boston to Washington, everywhere. It does scare me, the lack of oversight that journalism has now because of the dwindling numbers, and it is such a critical point. So one media outlet, it's Pittsfield Tonight. One media outlet, WMC, I'm saying they all matter because it's one extra voice that then can at least try to hold people accountable, because without it, my gosh,
there's a hole.
There's a lot that can happen and people don't know. And I had this conversation recently with a gentleman who was very very knowledgeable about state politics. And at Beacon Hill, I mean, at least in Pittsfield, we have an open meeting law, and there, of course, there are some committees that were created that were not under the open meeting law, as an example for the ARPA funds, right. That's a whole nother conversation. Totally disagree with that, that approach that the mayor took. But on Beacon Hill, for instance, they're exempt from the open meeting law. So if you don't have any kind of force as far as journalism, holding people accountable, in addition to laws that are keeping things secret, man, we're going in the wrong direction on that stuff. We need more. We need more voices and people holding public officials accountable.
I absolutely agree with that. But there has to be a professionalism and an etiquette to it. There has to be, because if you come out being vicious and mean, all you're doing, for one, is you're discouraging anybody else from running for office, because rather than thinking, well, maybe I'll run for office, like maybe I can call like Mike at It's Pittsfield Tonight, maybe he'll interview me. Rather than thinking that way, you might be thinking, oh, I ain't gonna do that. You see what that guy wrote about this one or that one? That's all I need him to do is you can push people over the edge doing that. And so there is a responsibility, I think, there, and it's a personal responsibility. If some people feel like it's appropriate to point out things that somebody has no control over, like their hair or something like that, and they want to rip them apart for that, if they feel that that's important, I mean, they're obviously showing what's really happening there. That's a very, very insecure person. I mean, basic psychology will tell you that. There's a little boy in there going, I'm going to make fun of everybody. And that's what happens. You're not living life. You're not experiencing things. You're not getting the most out of the moment. You're robbing yourself by being that way. You're stealing other human experiences and what you can learn from other people from yourself. And you're not helping anybody. You're just being a crybaby. And so there is a responsibility with that, because that's where we get into the dark side of social media and the, the online world, where people can just be unnecessarily vicious and start to disrupt the entire process because of it. You might have just discouraged somebody who might have been the next best mayor that the city ever saw. But maybe now that person isn't ever going to run because they saw what you just did to this one. And maybe they have some insecurities, like maybe they're a little overweight or something, and they don't want that to be something they get picked on for. So they'll decide, nah, I'll just keep to myself. I don't need that crap in my life.
Mm.
So there is a responsibility there. I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that. I don't know why they will, but you have to treat people how you want to be treated. And if you see somebody doing something wrong, that doesn't give you a free pass to do something wrong back to them. And your excuse is, well, look what they're doing. That's not an excuse. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And I don't know how people don't get that. So I think some of the flack that I've caught doing this is because of some of the stuff other people do. There's that aura about it, like, oh, great, just what we need, another one of these, another person coming out doing this, or you're just saying this because, for this political reason or that political reason. And the public starts to perceive it as it's just a game. And it shouldn't be that way. If you have something that you feel really needs to be heard and it's important, you don't attach that kind of negativity to it, because you're not educating anybody. So you're not going to ever get your message across. You're just going out there saying, hey, who wants to argue with me today? Well, who wants to argue with anybody today? Nobody really, so either get out there and do the right thing and say the right things. And if those right things might offend some people, who cares? So be it. But if there's bad intent or just to be mean, then you're screwing up the whole process. If what might disrupt people is the truth, well, it doesn't matter, because the truth will always prevail in the end when it comes to that. But that's what it's got to be centered around. Somebody who just likes to start a fight because they want to start a fight with somebody they don't like, you're screwing up the community. And that's where social media and the online world gets this whole bad reputation because of it. I totally believe that. Again, I've been wrong on things. I've been angry at times, and maybe I shouldn't have at certain times, but you got to own it. Too, I've never come out and just said, look at you and your dumb hair and your dumb this. I would never do that. It's got to be about an issue. But if you're wrong, you go, oh, okay, people will let you know. I've said things that, I've posted things at times where I'm like, oh, I gotta leave it now, and I caught it after I calmed down. I'm like, that wasn't too bright. You learn. But if your heart is in the right place and people know, yeah, I screwed up, but I am doing this for the right reasons, and I want to help. I'm trying to be part of the solution here, not part of the problem. And then of course, as you know, then there's certain people in the community that want to do what I do or you do, but maybe, and they should, but they might have some insecurities or some self-doubt. So because they're not doing it and they see you doing it, they get mad at you. It's a jealousy thing or something like that. And they'll start picking on you and make fun of you, and you're this and you're fake and you're, like, easy, man. If you want to have your own show, call it It's Pittsfield Tomorrow. I'll help you get it started, dude.
I like that. It's Pittsfield Tomorrow. Forward thinking.
So I totally agree with you that we need more people. More people should, I was a guy with a laptop and a Facebook page. What was there's no, I never claimed to be something special at all. I just felt like there was things that needed to be addressed. And I'm one of those people, like, I tell people, watch out, man, because if I dig in, I'm there. I don't do anything like part-time. It doesn't work, that my brain doesn't work that way. I'm full throttle. and I stay there. I will not let up. You
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
sink in, and that's it. And it's a continual learning process. And you know, life is. I would need 3 more of these lifetimes to learn just the things I want to learn about what doing at Pittsfield Tonight. That'll never be what I want it to be because there's not enough time.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, you're going back, you know, there may be this idea that today maybe there are more, you know, naysayers out there or whatever the perception is. But like, I've been doing this for a long time. There's always been people, you know, going to open mics, and a lot of the regular and over the generations, people have come and gone. And you know, there were times where it was far more caustic than you know it is today. I think that there is a lower threshold for open, differing opinions. And it's the nature, and I think we've talked about this in the past. It is the nature, I think, of this administration. I don't think it's unfair to say that there is a lower threshold for differing opinions. That
I agree.
It isn't going to be welcomed with open arms. It's going to be more a sort of, okay, we're going to put this person aside and no longer deal with him or her anymore because of that. And I think that's unfortunate, and I think that's kind of something that's been sort of just stirring this sort of just dull consternation over time. And this isn't necessarily a big flashpoint here or there, but I just think people are kind of just cranky about it, that they're not being heard, and if they do voice something, they're either ignored or maybe worse.
I totally agree. You know, I mean, I've been tough on everybody. When you were a city councilor, I was tough on you.
Sure,
Uh,
maybe,
but
it's been a while, so
yeah,
it's hard
but
for me to remember. But
you know, with all the, at this point, I've interviewed everybody now, except for one, and that would be the mayor. And I find it's always been odd to me because, like Earl Persip, I've been tough on Earl. I'd go out with Earl for a beer right now. I don't, you know what? I don't think I don't think of it the way that I think some people do. Any of the counselors. I don't, you know, I mean, people think that I'm like hiding somewhere sometimes, or I'll walk right up to anybody. There's nothing, this isn't personal. So it was odd to me that our mayor, I've bumped into her a few times, and literally twice she did, and turned and walked away. So I said, all right, I'm going to go around to the other aisle then. We're in the grocery store, man. And I said, yep, I'm going to cut her off and come back down here. And I came back around and she saw me and went the other way. And I was just like, really, this is really that personal. And you can't, you know, it should be that personal if you're in your house and you're sitting in your chair and that's your office and you bought these things and how dare this guy and da 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 da. But I'm not, when I critiqued that, I wasn't critiquing Linda Tyre and her chair in her house and this and that, because that chair in City Hall is not hers. That building is not hers. You know, none of that is hers. And when the title mayor is in front of her name, that's not Linda Tyre either. That's the head of the city, the department head of the overall city, and she is the mayor. It's not personal. When you take a position that everyone's livelihood is riding on your decisions, it's not gonna be butterflies and flowers all day where, oh, that's okay, we don't mind. You're gonna be critiqued. And if you're taking that personally, you're in the wrong job. Go into the private sector. And you shouldn't have to put up with that in the private sector. I mean, if the manager of Walmart had to go, oh, Christ, I got to hear what Mike Daly's saying about me again on It's Pittsfield Tonight, and I'm up there, well, aisle 8 was a complete mess. I don't know what Bob's doing here. Disgusting. You know, I think he's embezzling money. You know, I mean, you can't do that to somebody, you know. But when you're being paid by everybody in the city, and, you know, and a lot of them are not in the best of financial shape, and they see you living nice and high and comfortable, Well, then they expect results from that. Should a mayor make good money? If you're qualified and you're a good mayor, absolutely, because you'd want the position to attract the best. But I've always, in Pittsfield, I've looked at it as, well, you know, there's qualifications with certain jobs, right? If you go to apply for certain jobs, it might say master's degree required, or this required, or that required, you know, and then you can justify that pay because there's probably a lot of money that was invested into education and all the things that got you there. We don't have that in Pittsfield, you know, so it's got to be, that pay's got to be based off of results, I would think, right?
Well, that's not what the charter says.
But I mean, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not what the charter says. I
But
mean,
it
no, I
should
get
be,
that. I
it
totally
should
get
be
your
results
perspective.
driven.
Sure. I mean, I think, and and there's benefits and there are setbacks to the 4-year term. There are setbacks and there are some benefits, but I think, the good thing about the 2-year term is that there was a greater sense of urgency that you needed to accomplish things within 2 years. And I think over time, Pittsfield gave a lot of leeway after the first 2 years. There was a presumption that you kind of really need 4 years. So you wouldn't often see a heavy challenge after the first 2 years. Sarah Hathaway was an exception back in the early 2000s because things were so perceived as dysfunctional. I'm not going to say dysfunctional because I wasn't there, but the perception was dysfunction. So that was absolutely, I think, somewhat of a situation that isn't normal. Like, as an example, when Dan Bianchi was, after his first 2 years, he ran unopposed after his first term in office. So generally speaking, you kind of see that. And then Linda Tyre had the first 4-year term. But it is a good point that the sense of urgency isn't necessarily there when you get that 4-year term to show that you have accomplished something before that next election.
Absolutely. And again, the personal thing's got to be taken out of it. It does, unless somebody makes it personal. If I was up there saying, oh, here comes the mayor again, you see her hair? I think she's been eating a lot. You don't do that. You don't do that. That's how you're not accomplishing anything. You're making people mad and you're disrupting the community. But if you have issues on certain things that are affecting your day-to-day life, your wallet, you have every right to talk about that. And a mayor should say, okay, let me hear, if I had been Linda Tyre, as soon as she found out who's this Mike Daly, as soon as that had happened, if she had been, I don't want to say smart, but if she had been smart about it, she would have said, does anybody got a number for this guy? Let me ask him what his problem is. Let's see if we can sit down and figure this out. That's what I would have done. I would have went right to, I address everything immediately. What's the problem? And okay, so you obviously have some passion. Rather than battling each other, hey, we got another passionate person in the community. That's a good thing.
And that's actually a really great point in a lot of ways, because it is, you can take energy that's out there and you can utilize it and work together with someone. I don't want to say harness it because that sounds very condescending, but it's like you can work with someone to utilize the energy that they have and passion about the community to create something that's much better than where we are today, as opposed to opposing it and or ignoring it. And then where does that get you? It's a really great point.
Yeah, because as soon as you see that energy in anyone, that's a good thing. So it's like, okay, let's figure out how we can make this work, because that's somebody who's willing to work for the community. And there's tons of great people in our community that do that. And I feel like they're ignored. And it's like we're hurting ourselves by ignoring them. It's not about giving somebody attention. It's how do we use this for the betterment of everyone? Even people that maybe had doubted me at first, go around and talk to the business owners. They don't doubt me. Why? Because I go in and how can I help you? Can I do a video to help promote you? What can I do to help you succeed? And that's when people started asking me, Mike, what about you? You got to live. And I'll worry about that later. You know, you don't worry about that. To me, that's how my brain works. I don't worry about that stuff. You worry about what you're doing. And if you're doing the right thing, all that'll come together. It always does. God has always looked out for me, no matter what. If I've stayed on course, it's going to be fine. It always is. I don't sweat that stuff. If I open my fridge tonight and I go, damn it, it's still just that half a lemon sitting there, it'll be all right. Something will happen and it'll be all right. And it always has been. I'm still here, you know? It just works out that way. But I think we're with Mayor Tyre, where she has failed is it wasn't just with me, because I don't think she understood what I would have done for her. You know, I would have, not that I don't already, but I would have said, what do you need? Can I do promo video? How do I promote the city? What can we do? How do I address this? Do you want me to cover something? I would have been on top of everything. But instead, they show, when you act like that and you take somebody as a threat, what are you trying to protect? I'm not trying to take something away from you. I'm just trying to be part of something too. So what are you worried about? What are you getting so defensive about? Why am I the bad guy? To the point where, you know, you put my name in the paper and call me a known troublemaker and you do things like that. Like, really? You're talk about red flags. I don't know how everyone didn't see that. And then when certain supporters of her side would come out like, yeah, look what he's doing. He's a fake this. Yeah. How dare I go feed those people in the park? And how dare I go pass out water? And how dare I do those things? You know, I never understood. So when I see somebody being super defensive right away, common sense should tell anybody you're doing something wrong. And when I say something wrong, it could be just the way they're treating the situation, but you're not doing something the right way. You're missing the big picture here because you're focusing the attention on yourself. You're making it about you. And once you make it about you, then forget it. You just blew the whole deal. And that's how I think certain problems rose up in the community. That's how I see certain problems rising on that city council. And, you know, and you got people at home trying to watch half of that going, oh, good Lord. And they're embarrassed. And now, you know, the whole negative cloud starts to float through the city when you should have somebody saying, all right, everybody, we're all going to get together. We're going to figure this out and we're going to work together because that's what we're elected to do. No, let's not do that. Let's say, well, then we're going to have to get a recall started because I don't like what he's saying. Or we're going to have the Ward 4 counselor. I think we found something. Maybe we can put our friend over here up to signing this petition and that person not even show up for the meeting. So we got to get rid of him. They're at war with each other and the residents don't care about that. That just hurts them. So when politicians start making it about themselves, and that is the biggest problem, that's how all these things happen. So
I mean, to be completely fair, the people of Pittsfield are much more concerned with how they're going to pay for groceries this week.
Absolutely.
How they're going to pay for rent this month. It really is. I mean, so it was astonishing to me that the mayor took the time to take everyone's attention, because that is the power of the bully pulpit, and point this consternation, really attack this one individual. Not that he's great or perfect or anything. I'm not, but it just seems strange that that's the kind of thing that we're being asked to pay attention to when there's a lot of things going on. and a lot of it is families facing major challenges, just affording groceries and paying for gas and things like that. The technicalities and details and process of a city budget is not something that people are really eager to pay attention to right now, to be honest with you.
No, they're just looking at the end result. They wake up one day and go, how much is this bill?
Right.
They didn't pay attention to what got them there because they couldn't. They got a life to live, and they got this. Sure. I'm not going to sit there and watch these people all night on a Tuesday night.
The result, exactly. What is that bill going to look like at the end of the day? But this uh, dynamic and this the situation and the process, not many people pay attention to that. You know, you and I do, of course, and others do, but like, you know, read the room here, read the city. You know, guys, get together, get this thing done, and let's deal with help people deal with it. I mean, more people are paying attention to. I mean, hey, there's a lot of parents who are way more focused on Little League baseball right now
I mean,
than and school concerts and things like that. Get it together and a press conference. That was a little over the top.
yeah, and it's like, look, I've been involved in a couple of these type of scenarios, okay, and this one in particular, what we're talking about. We don't have to mention names, but you know, but I'm going to mention, go back to the pandemic. A certain, at the time, city councilor decided to do a dance one night, and who was the one to really call her out right away and really stir the pot? That was me, and I did, because I felt that that was wrong. But the way I address things is, not only did I feel it was wrong, I called her out, then I called her, then we met. Tell me what's going on. Let's hear your side of the story. Let's hash that out. It ended with, is that going to happen anymore? I made a mistake. This is that. We hugged. It's all done. She gave her apologies and we fixed it. That individual and me are friends now, but a lot of people took that situation and said, you threw her under the bus and now you're running out there to save her. But that wasn't the scenario. I called her out on something she did because it was wrong. I would have done that to my own father if he did something wrong. But you don't destroy that person. And that was another scenario where opposition took it too far. They made it, now it wasn't about that scenario during a pandemic and doing some dancing on a bar. It was, I'm going to wreck your life and try to take your business away from you and everything. And that individual didn't deserve that. Fast forward to where we're at now with a certain city councilor who I called out big time for sharing a certain article. And I was disgusted and upset and very upset about it. And what did I do? I reached out to him. I want you to come on. Let's talk about this. We did. Is it going to happen anymore? You know, we did one of those things. All right, let's put that situation to bed. We addressed it. Let's move on. Let's not do that again. Let's fix this and let's stick to the issues. But just like the other situation, that's not what is happening now. Now it's turned into, I see an opportunity. Let's go after him. Let's try to have him removed. Let's destroy his life. If we thought he said something so offensive, let's be that much more offensive back to him. So we can just keep pouring gasoline on this and wreck the city. And that's what it's going to do. If they try to have a certain city councilor removed, it's going to backfire. I can guarantee that. And that is the irresponsible thing to do. You sit down with them, you work with them, you work with each other, and you get back to business. And the next election, the residents will decide who the city councilor is going to be and who's not going to be. You do not try to override your constituents and basically tell them, I know what's better for you than you do, and we're doing a recall. Or we're going to take your bar license, your liquor license away. You don't do that. That's dirty, nasty politics, and that doesn't heal, fix, educate, or grow anything. And so just like that scenario, the prior one, I called that one out, but I'm already past it. I'm ready to, let's move forward. We got real issues to talk about here. Let's not do that stuff again, or else I'm going to call you out again until you stop doing it or you're gone. But if you're there for the right reason and you're really wanting to fix this, then I'm with you. I'm with you on that. So let's put that nonsense away. Stop doing the dumb stuff, because some of that was dumb in hindsight. And I hope somebody realizes that it was pretty dumb and could have seriously hurt some people. You can't do that, but learn from it. If somebody's willing to learn, educate them. You want to get your message across, you don't yell at somebody, you educate them. And then you can start to heal. And a good quality politician is somebody who can work with everybody. A crappy politician is somebody who says it's my way or the highway. That's not what you want.
You may not always accomplish what you want with dialogue, but you sure give it a shot. And I think constant and continuous dialogue is better than the alternative. And I've always believed in that.
Yeah, I hope that ends on a good note with
yeah.
all that. I hope that doesn't cause more chaos for the city. And I'm sure we'll find out more in the morning because there was a city council meeting tonight. But I hope that we are on a path to healing, because there's real work that has to be done. And, you know, you're looking at the economy, you're looking at real issues, like you said, food, gas, this and that, not who said what about who. I want to know what's, you know, I got bills to pay. I got a life to live, and I want to see my community flourish. There's people who need help here. You can't be sidetracked with this nonsense. That's not, we don't elect people to fight with each other. This isn't gladiator sports. I mean, I would pay money if these people would put the gloves on. I'd go to watch those, but that's not what they're there for. They're there to represent all of the city and not fight with each other. So I hope we can get past that, and I hope we can start doing what's right.
Think we missed anything?
I think we covered everything. We saved the planet, John.
We're gonna jump right into it. That's funny.
We're gonna step right into it.
Wow. It's just two guys having a conversation.
No, I enjoyed it.
It never hurts.
This was fun. I'm glad we finally did this. You know, it took us forever, and just every obstacle that kept coming, and I didn't know if we were ever going to get to this. So I'm glad we did this. It was fun.
Hey, we'll see you down the road. I'm sure I'll see you soon. And you know, I respect what you do. I think that clearly,
likewise,
everything that you have done in your life, you have poured yourself into. That is the pattern, and that's who you are. And I really respect that. That's a you know, amazing thing that you know, you've gone from one thing to another, but each time you're pouring your heart and soul into it. And I think there's a lesson there for people, like what real commitment means. And you've walked the walk. So I truly appreciate that, and totally respect it.
Awesome. Thank you.